balance necessary based on cash flows and any contingency requirements for those funds. Furthermore, the use of fund balance is restricted to pay for one-time capital or major maintenance projects and is not used for ongoing operations. The City of Shelton, like most other government entities, is facing budget sustainability issues where expenses increase each year at a pace that far exceeds the growth in resources. With that in mind, hard decisions are going to need to be made in the near future to determine what type of city services Shelton residents feel are most important and which services the city currently provides that should be discontinued unless resources are found to fund those ongoing operations. Homelessness in the city has become a priority issue, and the budget will include slightly under $100,000 to fund a homeless resource coordinator position. The position will work to coordinate efforts between the city, county, state, and not-for-profit organizations to work on homelessness issues, including prevention, treatment, and housing. Further public safety allocations include setting aside $50,000 of general fund monies this year to pay for improvements to the city's police vehicle fleet in 2020. Additionally, the proposed budget includes a general fund allocation for $30,000 to be set aside for needed emergency capital and/or major maintenance projects. While this is a step in the right direction, general fund capital needs continue to be delayed due to a lack of funding. The 2020 proposed budget includes necessary operating and capital monies for our city's utilities, capital projects, and funding for continued work to close out the C Street landfill. And the proposed budget is the culmination of an almost year-long collaborative effort between the City Council, myself, city staff, and residents and businesses in Shelton. The city serves a diverse population with a workforce that is committed to meeting the needs of the public. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our finance director, and he can walk through the information contained in your packet.
Thank you. Aaron B. Miller with the city's finance department. We don't have a real presentation plan for you today, as it's the first look for many of you to kind of take a look at the numbers. We wanted to just walk through the pages more or less. We won't walk through every single one, but we wanted to show you what's included in here and where we're going from here. Before we get started, I would like to just commend Don on all of his work on the budget. We got a new financial specialist position July, and Don's really sat down and really started pounding through this. We've done this the old-fashioned way. Everything was done in Excel, which makes it difficult. It's a great tool, but it makes it difficult to make changes. So be forewarned, there will be revisions coming, and as we go through that, we'll explain what each of the revisions are and why they're being made. So what you see today won't be what you end up adopting in about a month and a half or so. There are some key things in here that the preliminary budget includes that we know are already wrong, some of our assumptions on medical, but you have to just kind of take a point in time and say this is the preliminary budget, because if you keep doing gyrations all throughout, we'll never be done. So there are some things. That being said, it does include generally what is going to be going forward. So there will be some tweaks of the numbers, but hopefully there aren't massive shifts in the numbers from this point. We've gone through a lot of this information with the budget committee over the last 3 months or so, and gotten a lot of great feedback from them. So if you go through, after you turn the first page of City Manager's budget message, the next page that we have in there is the general fund requests that we've funded in the budget. And if you look at that, it's kind of a landscaped document. The department directors put in, I think it was about 80 requests for funding. A large portion of that, I want to say somewhere around 60 of those, were in the general fund. The general fund certainly could not afford to have all of those requests come forward. So what you're seeing here is the deliberations that took place from this department directors putting the budget requests forward, to a budget retreat in which the leadership team got together and went through. Jeff city manager made preliminary yes/no decisions, and that's what you see on this page. And then as we've continued to go forward, you can see in 2019 funding column, the second from the right, and then the 2020. That's what's funded in the budget. Of all those millions of dollars of requests, of all those 80 requests, this is what we could afford in the general fund. So just wanted to make that point. The next pages then, what you have are actually all of the requests that came forward. So this includes general fund. These 6 pages include general fund as well as utility funds. But we wanted to, give you a full look at all of the things that were requested, and then, of course, that first page shows you in the general fund what was funded. The projects that are funded by the non-general fund departments are listed in those pages, so we don't have a separate handout for that. And I'm not planning on going through this in its entirety, but if you turn to what would be page 6 of 6, on this, you can see the totals by fund from the 2020 requested funding. So you can see that there was a total of about $9.8 million requested. A lot of that in the utility funds, a lot of that also was in the general fund, about 1.5 million of it. So that's, for your information as you go through this, those are the requests. The next page, which again, so we tried to do this as best we could, putting it together at 3 o'clock this afternoon finally. So there are some blank pages in here. We did paginate, but the blank pages aren't included in that pagination. So if you see a blank page, it's supposed to be blank. General fund summary on what then is page 1 of 34. Again, just a very high level showing our 2017 actuals, 2018 actuals, the 19 revised budget, our estimates. One thing I do want to mention about estimates, these are old estimates.
Could I interrupt you just a second?
Go.
I don't have 1 of 34 in my packet. You may have it on your computer program. Do you have this? I start at page 6 of 34, unless they got put together wrong. So mine starts on page 6 of 34, so it looks like 5 pages were left out.
We'll get that sorted for you.
Guess what? I now have.
You now have it.
Missing
Yeah.
the missing link.
Oh, I have
We-
I have an extra 6 of 34, it looks like.
That's
Oh,
right.
no.
I got mine right here. I'm right with you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it shows, the general fund summary shows our revenues against our expenses from 17 through the 2020 working. And again, 2020 budget is balanced. It's no use of fund balance in that, and all of those costs are supported by ongoing operations. The next page in then is just the general fund revenue summary. Again, it breaks it down, our $12,264,000 into the different types of categories. Again, this is just really for information purposes. What we're hoping that comes of this is you'll take this home, you'll look at it, and then I think moving forward, if you want to send an email or let Jeff know if you have any questions, then we can address them at our 11/5, November 5th gathering on those particular questions. The only thing that we would ask is if you have some of those, if you can get those to Jeff so he can get them to us at least a week in advance, so we have some time to do some research if necessary, moving forward. The next page is then we break into the departments, and we're showing all of the departments by these larger expense categories: wages, benefits, our service and charges, which are significantly professional services, our supplies, and then any capital outlay. Then lower down on that, you'll have the staffing since 2018, and then the 2020 working shows you how we got to that staffing level. So you can see who is being funded by those salary and wages up above, and if there's any change in the funding. And we will go through that in a little bit more detail of what those changes are. In this case, the admin support assistant position that was one full FTE in the 2020 budget has been reduced to a 0.8 FTE. And because that position is spread throughout the city council, the city manager, and finance, it kind of, you'll see these little pieces moving around. So that's what we have for you here. I did want to bring your attention as you get there to the human resources page, which is on page 8 of 34. And the reason I want to show you this page is because when, on that first page that we talked about where we showed where the general fund additions were, which department they were in, we also have them on this page. So you should see a correlation from that very first page we looked at that shows increases to what's in here. Again, we wanted to show you where these are taking place in the budget. And we are also wanting to make sure that we are showing whether it's a one-time only or whether it's an ongoing. And so in this case, these are ongoing costs, ongoing long-term changes. I'll let you kind of sort through that a little bit, and then when we're ready, I want to jump forward to page 16 of 34. So on page 16 of 34, this is the first fund outside of the general fund in the book. And so it's presented in the same way, but it does have a couple of differences. So again, it shows the revenues on the top and the wages on the bottom. And then it has the 2020 additions last time. So in this case, a full-time operator is funded in the street fund as well as a salt bin building. You can see that the operators and ongoing, the salt bin building is a one-time cost. And then we have below there the other requests for these funds that were unable to be funded for whatever reason. Either it fell off as a priority, or based on the level of fund balance they had, the level of revenues, and the level of ongoing expenditures, if it was able to be funded. One of the conversations that we had in our budget committee meetings is the establishment of, excuse me, of fund balance levels. And we called them desired fund balance levels for the general fund, for many of the utilities, and a few other funds of where we think we should be and at a fund balance stance, so that we have some capital available should something happen. And so for the general fund, we've kind of narrowed it down to about 16%, which represents about 2 months of operating. Street, we also had about 16%, and then most of the utilities are at 20. We will be bringing a fund balance ordinance forward, which changes those requirements. And again, we're calling it a desired level because the fund balance is there. If it needs to be used, we don't want to handcuff ourselves and not be able to use it for situations that we need to. So this is really how most of the rest of the pages come forward. If you turn the page over, then you can see the street staffing on the backside of that. So that's how the budget at this point in time, how we've put it together. The other thing I wanted to make mention of is page 19 to 34 is our bond fund summary, but we have 2 pages behind there, well, one page on a landscape. This is the city's outstanding debt. I didn't know the last time that we've talked about the outstanding debt for the city, so we thought we would put this in there. Currently, you can see on
You're on 19 of 34?
Well, 20 of 34 now,
Okay,
yep,
thank
20
you
of
for the
34 now.
information.
Yep. In order to make this fit, we cut this in two. So the same debt is on both sides, and then you just have different information to the right of that. And so the first page of 20 of 34 shows you what the loan is, who it's payable to, the interest rate, the type of debt, the department subtype of the debt, so it's a public trust fund loan, the date it was initiated, the maturity date, and then if you turn the page, we have the remaining amount at the beginning of 2020, then the amount that we'll pay in interest and the amount that we'll pay in principal, and then the ending principal balance at the end of 2020. So you can see we start with about 41.8 million. We pay 970 in interest and 1.8 in principal, and then at the end, so total of 2.8, and then at the end of the year, the principal balance is reduced by that same $1.8 million. So again, just wanted to provide that information for you on that. Not all of the debt, I will warn you, not all of the debt certainly is paid for out of the bond fund. So it's the significant portion of our debt is paid out of the sewer fund, and you'll see that in the sewer fund. I want to say about 2.3 million of our $2.8 million debt service is paid out of that fund. Outside of just kind of talking through anything that the council would like to talk through or look through, that's how this book works at this point in time. We are working now on a budget overview, which will add some context to this information. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get that done by the time we needed to get this to you. So that is something that will be coming on the 11/5 meeting. And again, any adjustments that we make, we'll keep track of the adjustments, make sure that you guys get those adjustments and the reasons behind them. So with that, Mayor, I turn it over to questions or?
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks for all the work everyone's done on this, so
You bet.
appreciate that. So start with questions from the council for Aaron or for others.
I already talked once about it.
All right. Just to clarify, when we were talking about the desired end fund balances for the group, one of the things that I did find in the committee meetings that we talked about is certain funds that theoretically the end fund balance should be zero, right? So we should be like in the bond fund, for example.
Right.
So while we will strive to have 16, 16, and 20 in utilities, some funds we won't end up with an end fund balance the way that works. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, correct. And just to kind of follow up on that, we do have a fund balance right now in the bond fund of about $11,000. To Councilmember Schmidt's point, what should go into the debt service fund is simply what's going to come out of the debt service fund. And so what we will end up doing, whether it's in 2020 or sometime soon after that, will transfer about $11,500 less into this fund than that current year's expenses, and then that would dwindle this fund down to about zero. So.
Okay, no response?
Well, I just want to commend everybody in this room, really, on the time that we've been here and that our debt this last year, we did not choose to go from 41 to 48. We hung in there, we went from 41 on down to 39 point whatever, and that the history again was, not many years ago, just a few, we were at 60 going to 70 and 80 was really right there. And because of many businesses that have come in and prudence on the part of the city overall, a lot of people, that we managed to hold that down a little bit. And so that's a big deal with me, because it was something that I knew 8 years ago that the city could not continue to borrow $10 and $20 million a year, every year, forever, and have the ability to, and we got a hold of it. Now, what we do with that in the future, I really don't know. But my main question, aside from complimenting everybody probably here, thank you all for what you've done. Towards homeless issues, funding for homelessness and whatnot, it looks like in this current budget, we have $100,000 for a new salary person, is the coordinator person. And I think that's the person that Chief Moody has been talking about over a couple of years, maybe about having a person kind of working. Is that kind of correct? Had you ever talked, let me talk to you, Jeff. Has Darren Moody ever talked to you a little bit about that would be a good idea, to have a person like that, or how did that idea come about?
Chief Moody has, and it's also something that I've seen in other cities that are running more effective programs to address homelessness issues in their jurisdictions.
That's great.
It also, when we ask for money from our state delegation to help us address homelessness issues, it helps to show that we are making an effort to do something on our own, and for match programs as an in-kind contribution if we were able to apply and receive one of those.
And in this, budgets, tight budget type of stuff, that's $100,000, I think, well spent, and it's a good step in the direction of addressing that issue, which we know doesn't appear to be going away. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
You bet. Can I just add, I wanted to make mention of this when we first started, and I forgot. So on that first page after the city manager's letter, speaking of public safety types of issues, originally we had planned to include $50,000 of capital for new police cars in 2020, but we revised that slightly. Rather than budgeting it in 2020, we are going to move 50,000 of the 2019 monies that we have now into capital so that the police can buy those police cars. We wanted to take out the risk of what may happen next year if there is an economic slowdown, if the revenues don't come in where we're estimating them to be, so that is already taken care of. And again, that's a big need. That was the number one need for Chief Moody, and so we wanted to make sure that we got that budgeted. That's why you see that in the 2019 column. We are also buying $16,000 of police cars this year, and so that's why that number, rather than 50, is 66. Just clarifying on that piece.
Other questions for Aaron?
I anticipate it's forthcoming, but we'll get digital copies of these in Excel so we can get in and dig in a little bit more.
Yeah, we certainly can.
Councilmember Schmidt?
Jeff, can you talk a little bit about some of the, I want to say, risks with capital coming in 2020 that we're willing to play it a little closer to the line to keep the ship righted?
Yeah, there are significant, Aaron mentioned a little bit about the funding requests. A lot of those from the department directors, excuse me. Quite a few of those, I believe 1.5 million was from the general fund. But really what the capital fund, and kind of rambling a little bit here, but really what capital is intended to do when a garage door spring breaks, when our uninterruptible power supply for the building goes out, things like that. We want to be able to maintain those things. And the thing I heard since we began developing the budget is everything in this building is 22 years old. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because that's when it was refurbished and turned into our civic center. 22-year-old things are expected to fail. And we need to have the resources available to fix those when they happen so that we don't take on or have to take on additional debt, as Councilmember Krantz mentioned, in order to fix them. We will be creating next year, I believe, a capital projects fund. I can't remember what exactly it was called. What was?
The Capital Resources Fund.
Capital Resources Fund, where we will move monies into that fund, and then as projects are developed and brought to council for approval, we'll move money from that fund directly to that project. But it's really, this year, we weren't able to put a whole lot in there, but we wanted to get it started so that we will have those resources and it will begin to build, so when we see a need, we can fix it, rather than having to borrow or anything else.
And just a quick follow-up on that, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the advantages of the Capital Resources Fund is that
all funds within the city could contribute to that, correct? Utilities included?
That will be, it could, and that will be a decision that I'll talk to council about in the coming months.
Okay.
Other questions? Question, on, just a clarification, the business and occupation tax now is back to including utilities, is that correct?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
it does in this. It won't be your presentation this evening.
And
but
I
yes.
brought that up because I had a question of B and O taxes, because when you had them separate, which you have.
Yeah.
You had B and O taxes going up fairly, not significantly, but a fairly large
I think
amount.
2%. Yeah, I think the 2020 budget is something like about $750,000 for that,
And your reasoning, I mean, you've told us you're bidding pretty conservative, especially on sales tax.
Yeah.
It's relatively conservative.
Yeah, so on B and O tax, we're going up 2%, not so much because we think the economy may go up by 2%, but the growth of businesses within the city and the amount that we're collecting coming in. Regarding sales tax, what we've done is we've kind of tapped the brakes on that a little bit, and our sales tax in 2019 includes about 25% of the total sales tax is related to heavy construction. Well, as the construction starts to normalize and as planning and building permits numbers begin to normalize, we wanted to dial back a little bit on that. So regarding sales tax, we are pulling that back down to more in line with the 2017 and 2018 levels than the 2019 because it's quite out of line. It's out of the norm, the 2019 numbers.
But you did have a growth in the B and O tax.
Yes, a small one.
Small
Just-
one.
yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, see, I really appreciate, at least personally appreciate the format on the department pages, because I tend to compare to other cities, and this is really, not exactly, but very similar to some other cities, so I
Great.
appreciate that. So,
Great.
thank you very much.
You bet.
So, okay, hearing none, we will adjourn our study session.